I'm Elizabeth, 32, female, and my mother told me I'd embarrass the family if I showed up to the most important night of my life. The words didn't come with a fiery burst of anger, but with the cold, tired disappointment she had perfected over 3 decades. It was a tone that said, "Why do you keep trying? Why do you insist on being you?" "Elizabeth, you have to be reasonable," my mother Helen said, her voice a sigh through the phone. "This isn't some little school fair. This is the governor's gala. Mark's entire firm will be there. Our friends will be there. It's an important night for your brother." For your brother, the three words that had formed the foundation of our family dynamic for as long as I could remember. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. In my other hand was the reason for the call, a thick cream-colored envelope with an embossed seal. It was an invitation, not just to attend the gala, but to be its guest of honor. I was to receive the Innovator of the Year award for my work in sustainable energy technology. My company, Luminara Tech, the little startup I had poured my blood, sweat, and every last penny into, was finally being recognized on a massive scale. For a fleeting, foolish moment, I thought this would be it. This would be the achievement even my mother couldn't dismiss. "I understand it's important for Mark," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "I just thought it would be nice if we could all be there as a family." A short, dry laugh came through the receiver. "And do what? What would you even talk to these people about? Your little computer projects? Darling, these are serious people. Lawyers, judges, investors. Mark is trying to make partner. The last thing he needs is his sister in the corner trying to explain her hobby." Hobby, she had been calling it my hobby for 12 years. From the first circuit board I soldered in our garage to the day I secured my first round of seed funding, it was always my little project or my cute hobby. It was the thing that kept me from getting a real job, from marrying a nice young man, and from giving her the kind of daughter she could boast about at her book club meetings. A daughter like Mark's wife, who was a respected pediatrician. Not a daughter who came home with grease under her fingernails and talked about photovoltaic cells at the dinner table. "Mom, it's not a hobby," I said, the words feeling worn and useless from overuse. "The company is doing very well." "We all know you try your best, dear," she said, the condescension as thick as honey. "But let's be realistic. It would be better for everyone if you just sat this one out. We'll tell you all about it afterwards. It will be just like you were there." With that, she ended the call, leaving a dial tone buzzing in my ear. I slowly lowered the phone, the silence of my apartment amplifying the ringing in my ears. The conversation was a perfect echo of 100 others. The hurt was familiar, a dull ache I had learned to live with, but this time something else was mixed in with it. It was the sharp, clean sting of finality. I looked down at the invitation again. Ms. Elizabeth Vance, founder and CEO of Luminara Tech, they saw me. The city, the governor, the business community, they saw me. The only people on earth who refused to were the ones who shared my blood. My brother Mark was the sun around which our family planet revolved. At 35, he was a successful corporate lawyer, handsome, charming, and effortlessly brilliant in all the ways our parents understood. He had followed the blueprint they laid out for him: top university, prestigious law school, a job at a powerful firm, a beautiful wife, and two perfect children. He was their masterpiece. I, on the other hand, was the failed experiment. I was the artistic, messy, and stubbornly independent daughter who had refused to fit into the mold. My earliest memories were of my mother praising Mark for his perfect report card while gently suggesting I spend less time taking apart old radios and more time on my penmanship. One memory in particular stood out with painful clarity. It was my high school graduation. I had won the district's top award for a science project, a rudimentary solar-powered water purifier. I was ecstatic. I remember running to my parents after the ceremony, holding the heavy glass trophy in my hands, my face beaming. My mother glanced at it, her smile thin and distracted. "Oh, that's lovely, dear, very creative." Her eyes were already scanning the crowd for Mark. "Have you seen your brother? He just confirmed he got into the accelerated pre-law program. His father is so proud." She turned away, leaving me standing there with my award feeling foolish and small. My father, Robert, gave me a quick pat on the shoulder. "Good work, Lizzie," he mumbled before following his wife to go congratulate the real star of the family. I spent the rest of the night watching them boast about Mark's future legal career to anyone who would listen. My trophy sat on the corner of a table, forgotten. The pattern only solidified in college. They paid for Mark's entire law school tuition without blinking an eye. It was an investment in their legacy. When I approached them a year later, not for a handout, but for a small loan of $5,000 to build my first major prototype, the atmosphere turned glacial. $5,000, my father had said, looking at me over the top of his newspaper as if I'd asked for a kidney. For what? One of your gadgets. It's a new battery design, I explained, my business plan trembling in my hands. It could dramatically increase energy storage for solar panels. I think it could really be something. My mother sighed her signature sigh. Elizabeth, we gave you money for a good education and you studied engineering. Why can't you just get a stable job with a good company? Like Mark did, all this, inventing, it's so uncertain. We can't throw good money after a failed investment. A failed investment, me. They weren't talking about the money, they were talking about me. I ended up working 3 part-time jobs, waiting tables, tutoring undergraduates, and coding websites for local businesses. I lived on instant noodles and cheap coffee, pouring every spare dollar and every waking hour into my prototype. I paid for every component, every patent application, every bit of it myself. That $5,000 they refused me became a wall between us, a symbol of their complete lack of faith in me. Years later, when my company was finally off the ground and starting to make a name for itself in the tech world, I thought things might change. I was invited to a family dinner to celebrate Mark's promotion. The entire evening was a shrine to his success. Toasts were made, expensive wine was poured. My parents looked at him with a kind of reverent awe. Near the end of the night, feeling a little bold from the wine, I decided to share some of my own good news. Actually, I have something to celebrate too, I announced. Luminara just signed a contract to install solar panels on all new municipal buildings. There was a polite pause. Mark smiled thinly. Well, good for you, Lizzie. Government contracts can be steady work. Before I could explain the scale of the project, my mother cut in, her voice bright and dismissive. That's nice, dear. So are you seeing anyone special? Your cousin Sarah just got engaged to a lovely young doctor. And just like that, my achievement was swept away, replaced by the familiar topic of my personal failings. My career was irrelevant. My value was still measured by a checklist I had no interest in completing. Now standing in my quiet apartment, the dial tone of fading memory, I felt the weight of all those moments settle over me. For years, I had been chasing their approval, hoping that one day I would do something so spectacular they would have no choice but to see me. I had finally done it. I had reached the pinnacle of my field, and their reaction was to ask me to hide so I wouldn't cast a shadow on their perfect sun. A strange calm washed over me. The hurt was still there, but it was no longer a fire. It was a cold, hard stone in the pit of my stomach. The phone call wasn't an insult, it was a clarification. It was the final, undeniable piece of evidence that their love was not unconditional. It was, in fact, highly conditional, and I did not meet the terms. I looked from the silent phone to the gleaming invitation. I thought of my team, the brilliant, dedicated people who had worked alongside me, sharing my vision when no one else would. I thought of the years of sacrifice. This award wasn't just for me, it was for all of them. It was a testament to our shared belief in a better future. My mother wanted me to sit it out, to stay home, to be invisible, to protect her son's image and her own fragile sense of family pride. I picked up the invitation, my fingers tracing the embossed letters of my name. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just been handed a key she never knew she was missing, the key to her own cage. So I was going to the gala, and I was going to be anything but invisible. The immediate aftermath of the phone call was quiet. I didn't rage or cry. The emotional storms I used to weather after every dismissive comment or casual cruelty from my family had over the years calmed into a kind of weary monsoon season, predictable, damp, and draining. But this time was different. The rain had stopped. The clouds had parted, and what was left was a landscape of stark, unadorned clarity. My mother's words, "It would be better for everyone if you just sat this one out," echoed not as an attack, but as a release. For my entire life, I had been trying to earn a seat at a table where I was never truly welcome. I'd tried to be a good daughter, a supportive sister, contorting myself into shapes that might be more palatable, more acceptable. I'd muted my successes so they wouldn't feel threatening and downplayed my ambitions so they wouldn't seem strange. All it had earned me was a request to disappear on the one night that was supposed to be about me. I walked over to my office, a spare room in my apartment filled with whiteboards covered in equations, shelves of technical manuals, and the faint, clean smell of ozone from my 3D printer. This room, this sanctuary of logic and creation, was where I had built my life. It was here, fueled by coffee and a defiant belief in my own ideas, that Luminara Tech was born. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was David, my COO and my best friend. He was the first person I had hired, a brilliant business mind who had seen the potential in my chaotic genius when we were both just 2 years out of college. He was the only person who knew the full, unedited history of my family. "So how'd the call go?" his text read. "Are they dusting off the fatted calf for the prodigal daughter's return?" I smiled wryly and typed back, "The calf is safe. I've been officially uninvited. Apparently my presence would be an embarrassment." The three dots indicating he was typing appeared instantly. A moment later, my phone rang. "She did not," David's voice boomed, full of indignation. "Elizabeth, tell me she did not say that to you." "In so many words," I confirmed, sinking into my office chair. "It's a big night for Mark, and she's worried my hobby will lower the tone." "Unbelievable," he sputtered. "Simply unbelievable. The woman is receiving the Innovator of the Year award, and her mother is worried she'll use the wrong fork. So what are you going to do? Tell them, send them a link to the press release and a photo of the trophy." I leaned my head back, staring at the ceiling. The old me, the younger, more hopeful Elizabeth, would have done exactly that. She would have fired back a text with links and proof, desperate to make them see their mistake. But I wasn't her anymore. Their approval was a drug I had finally detoxed from. "No," I said slowly, a new kind of resolve hardening in my voice. "I'm not going to tell them anything, I'm just going to go." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then David let out a low whistle. "Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. No warning, no heads up. You're just going to materialize on stage." "It's not for them," I said, more to convince myself than him. "This isn't about revenge, David. This is about me, for once. I'm going to go, I'm going to accept my award, and I'm going to celebrate with the people who actually helped me get there. My team's you." "We'll be there," he said, his voice warm with support. "The whole leadership team has a table. We wouldn't miss it for the world. But Liz, are you sure you're ready for the fallout? When they see you up there, it's going to be a nuclear event." "Let it be," I said, and for the first time, I felt a sense of power in the thought. I wasn't just reacting to their drama anymore, I was taking control of the narrative. They built the reactor, they can deal with the meltdown. The days leading up to the gala took on a new, symbolic weight. Every preparation felt like a step away from the person they thought I was and a step toward the woman I had become. The most significant of these was choosing what to wear. For years, dressing for family events had been an exercise in camouflage. I'd choose muted colors, conservative cuts, anything to help me blend into the wallpaper and avoid my mother's critical eye. "Are you sure about that neckline, dear? It's a bit severe." "Gray again, Elizabeth. You have such lovely skin, you should wear more color." This time I wasn't dressing for her. I walked into a boutique I'd normally find too intimidating and found myself drawn to a dress that was the antithesis of my usual choices. It was a deep emerald green, the color of new life and precious stones. The fabric was a heavy silk that moved like liquid, and the cut was simple but striking, a sleek floor-length column with a sharp, asymmetrical neckline. It was bold, elegant, and unapologetic. Trying it on in the dressing room, I didn't see the awkward, nerdy girl who was always a little out of place. I saw a CEO, I saw a leader, I saw myself. The final piece of preparation was my acceptance speech. I spent an entire evening on it, sitting at my desk with a cup of tea, the city lights twinkling outside my window. My first draft was angry. It was a thinly veiled list of grievances, full of lines about overcoming a lack of support and believing in yourself when no one else will. It was a speech aimed directly at my family's table. I read it aloud and felt a sour taste in my mouth. It was petty, it was small. It would give them the satisfaction of knowing they still had a hold on me. David was right, this couldn't be about them. This night was the coup. Culmination of my life's work. To use it to air family grievances would be to diminish the achievement itself. I deleted the file and started over. This time I wrote from a place of gratitude and passion. I wrote about the beauty of science, the thrill of discovery, and the profound hope that technology gives us for a cleaner, better world. I told the story of Luminara Tech not as a struggle against my family, but as a journey with my team. I wrote about David's unwavering faith, about my lead engineer's brilliant mind, about our first intern who now managed an entire department. I filled the speech with their names, their contributions, their successes. They were my family. They had been the ones to offer me a seat at their table, no questions asked. I wrote about the city that had fostered our growth, the investors who took a chance on a young woman with a wild idea, and the customers who believed in our mission. I didn't mention my parents or my brother once. My silence on the subject, I realized, would be more eloquent and more damning than any accusation I could ever write. On the afternoon of the gala, I left work early and began to get ready. The process was a ritual. I showered, letting the hot water wash away the last remnants of doubt. I did my own makeup, a skill I'd learned from online tutorials, a small act of self-reliance. I styled my hair, letting it fall in loose waves over my shoulders. Finally, I slipped on the emerald dress. It felt like armor. As I stood before the full-length mirror, I saw the culmination of my choices. The years of lonely work, the rejection, the quiet determination, it had all led to this moment. The woman in the mirror wasn't an embarrassment. She wasn't a hobbyist. She was the innovator of the year, and she was ready. As I picked up my clutch to leave, my phone buzzed. It was a picture message from Mark. It showed him our parents and his wife all dressed to the nines, smiling in the foyer of my parents' house. The caption read, "Off to the gala, wish you could be here." The winking emoji was a final, tiny twist of the knife. It was a little joke between him and them, a confirmation that I was where I belonged, outside looking in. I looked at their happy, perfect faces. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of the phone, and I smiled. "Don't worry," I whispered to the empty room, "I will be." The venue for the governor's gala was the city's historic Grand Ballroom, a breathtaking space of soaring ceilings, marble columns, and crystal chandeliers that dripped light like frozen waterfalls. The air buzzed with the low hum of influential conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the soft strains of a string quartet. This was the inner sanctum of the city's elite, a world my mother revered and one I had always observed from a great, unbridgeable distance. Tonight, however, I wasn't an observer, I was the main event. A car service had dropped me at a private side entrance, away from the red carpet where the press was gathered. An event organizer, a woman named Clara with a warm smile and an efficient headset, greeted me the moment I stepped out. "Ms. Vance, welcome. We're so thrilled to have you. The governor is very much looking forward to meeting you." She led me through a quiet corridor, her tone respectful and deferential. It was a strange and foreign experience. In my family, deference was a one-way street that flowed directly to my parents and Mark. To be treated as a person of importance felt like wearing a suit of clothes that didn't quite fit, but I straightened my shoulders and played the part. "Thank you for having me, Clara. It's an honor to be here," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She guided me to a balcony overlooking the main ballroom. "We have a private reception for the honorees upstairs, but I thought you might like a moment to take it all in." From our vantage point, I had a perfect, godlike view of the sea of black tie attire and glittering gowns below. The room was bathed in a warm, golden light, and waiters moved silently through the crowd with trays of champagne. And then I saw them. My family, they were standing near one of the grand marble columns holding court. My father, Robert, looking distinguished in his tuxedo. My brother Mark, looking every bit the handsome, successful lawyer, laughing at something one of his colleagues said, and my mother Helen, radiant in a navy blue dress, her hand resting proudly on Mark's arm. She was beaming, a picture of maternal pride, surveying the room as if it were her own personal kingdom. She was in her element. This was the world she understood, the one she had tried so desperately to push her children into. This was a room full of people who measured success in dollars, titles, and connections, the very metrics by which she had always found me lacking. As I watched, I saw her fuss with Mark's bow tie, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times. She would straighten it, tee his lapel, and look up at him with an expression of pure, unconditional adoration. It was a look she had never once given me. A familiar pang of hurt, sharp and swift, pierced through my carefully constructed composure. It was the ghost of the little girl who just wanted her mommy to look at her that way. They were so blissfully unaware, so confident in their place in the universe. They believed I was at home in my apartment, probably eating takeout and working on my hobby, completely removed from this glittering world. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. "Quite a crowd, isn't it?" Clara said softly beside me. I pulled my eyes away from my family, forcing myself to refocus. "It is," I said. "Well, let's get you away from the noise," she said, leading me away from the balcony's edge. "The other honorees are waiting. There's a community activist and a celebrated local artist. You're in good company." She led me to a luxurious private suite where champagne and hors d'oeuvres were being served. The other two honorees were a kind-faced older woman who had started a citywide literacy program and a young, dynamic artist whose murals were transforming neglected parts of the city. They greeted me warmly, without pretense. We talked about our work, our passions, our hopes for the city. In the space of 10 minutes, I felt more seen and respected by these two strangers than I had by my own family in a lifetime. My team was also at the gala. David had texted me a photo of their table. They were all there, my brilliant engineers, my tireless marketing director, my unflappable head of operations. They were smiling, raising their glasses to the camera, my real family. Seeing their faces, even on a small screen, bolstered my resolve. This night was for them. An hour later, Clara returned. "It's almost time for the main presentation, Ms. Vance. We'll be seating you on the dais shortly. Is there anything you need?" "No, thank you, Clara. I'm ready," I said. She led me down a different corridor, one that led to the back of the main stage. Through a small gap in the curtains, I could see the ballroom again. The guests were now seated at their tables, the lights dimmed, and a hush had fallen over the crowd. I scanned the room and found my family's table. It was a prime spot right near the front. They were chatting with the people seated with them, Mark's boss and his wife, I presumed. They looked pleased, important. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a nervous fluttering in my chest. This was it, the point of no return. I clutched the small note cards with my speech on them, the paper cool against my clammy skin. I took a deep breath, picturing my office, my whiteboards, the quiet hum of my servers. I thought of the first time one of my prototypes actually worked, the pure, unadulterated joy of creation. I channeled that feeling, letting it push back the fear. I was not the girl who took apart radios in the garage. I was not the awkward teenager with the forgotten trophy. I was not the daughter who was an embarrassment. I was Elizabeth Vance, and I was about to step into the light. From the wings of the stage, the world was a collection of muffled sounds and fractured images. I watched on a small monitor as the governor gave his opening remarks, his voice a distant, booming echo. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat counting down to the moment my two worlds would collide. My carefully constructed professional life and my painfully dysfunctional family life were on a collision course, and I was standing at ground zero. In my mind's eye, I pictured my family at their table. They would be listening politely, my father with his serious, attentive expression, my mother with her gracious smile. Mark would be leaning in, making a witty comment to his boss, completely at ease. To them, this was just another corporate event, another rung on Mark's ladder to success. They would be sipping their wine, blissfully ignorant, with no idea that the carefully curated world they had built was about to be turned upside down by the person they had so carelessly cast aside. After a series of lesser awards and acknowledgments, the governor returned to the podium. The lights in the ballroom dimmed further, and a single bright spotlight hit the stage. And now, the governor's voice resonated through the hall, we come to our final and most prestigious award of the evening, the Innovator of the Year Award. A polite ripple of applause went through the rooms. This award, he continued, his tone growing more passionate, is not simply about business success. It is about vision, it is about courage. It is about the audacity to look at the world as it is and imagine something better. It honors a person who has not only built a thriving enterprise but has done so with a purpose that serves our entire community and indeed the world. I could imagine my mother nodding along, thinking how perfectly this desker ibed her son's ambition. Mark was probably already picturing himself on this stage in a few years' time. This year's honoree, the governor boomed, is a true hometown hero. A visionary who started with little more than a dream and an unshakable belief in the power of sustainable energy. They faced skepticism and overcame immense obstacles, bootstrapping their way from a garage workshop to a global leader in green technology. My breath caught in my throat. He was telling my story. Every word was a stone being laid on the path that had led me here. From my vantage point, I couldn't see my family's faces clearly, but I could imagine their expressions. Polite interest, mild curiosity. They'd be thinking of some grizzled tech billionaire, some well-known name from the business pages. The idea that these words could be about me, about their Elizabeth, was simply not within their realm of possibility. This individual's work, the governor went on, his voice filled with admiration, is already revolutionizing our city's energy grid, reducing our carbon footprint, and creating hundreds of high-paying jobs right here at home. Their technology is poised to change the world. He paused for dramatic effect. The entire ballroom was silent, hanging on his next words. This was the moment. Time seemed to slow down, to stretch and warp. And then he said it. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound honor to present the Innovator of the Year Award to the brilliant founder and CEO of Luminara Tech, Ms. Elizabeth Vance. For a split second, there was silence. The name hung in the air, an impossible alien sound in that room. Then the applause erupted, a thunderous wave of sound. The spotlight swung from the podium and swept across the room, searching for me. But the camera operators, masters of their craft, did something even more dramatic. For a brief, glorious moment, the main camera zoomed in on table 12, on my family. And their faces were broadcast on the two enormous screens, flanking the stage for all 500 guests to see. It was a masterpiece of unintentional cruelty. My father's face was a mask of utter, slack-jawed confusion. He looked at my mother as if to ask if he'd heard correctly. My brother Mark's suave, confident smile had frozen and shattered, his eyes wide with disbelief. But it was my mother's face that I will remember for the rest of my life. Her gracious, proud smile for her son had vanished. In its place was a look of pure, unadulterated horror. Her mouth was slightly agape, the color draining from her cheeks. She looked as if the ghost of a person she'd long since buried had just materialized in front of her. The embarrassment she had been so worried I would cause had arrived, but not in the way she had ever imagined. The embarrassment was not me, it was her. It was the shock of being exposed, of having her ignorance laid bare for her entire social circle to witness. A stagehand gave me a gentle nudge. That's you, Ms. Vance. I took a breath, smoothed down the front of my emerald dress, and walked out of the darkness of the wings and into the blinding white light of the spotlight. I walked with a confidence I didn't know I possessed, my heels clicking purposefully on the stage floor. The applause grew louder as I moved. I kept my eyes fixed on the governor, who was smiling warmly at me, holding the heavy, gleaming trophy. I didn't look at my family. I didn't have to. I could feel the heat of their combined stares on my skin. As I reached the podium and shook the governor's hand, I allowed myself a quick glance at their table. Mark was staring at me, his expression a chaotic mix of shock and something I could only describe as calculation, the wheels already turning in his lawyerly brain. My father was just shaking his head slowly, as if trying to wake from a dream. And my mother, she had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrible understanding. The little girl inside me who had cried over a forgotten science trophy was finally, definitively gone. In her place stood a woman who held her own destiny in her hands. I turned to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of faces ready to speak. The applause slowly subsided, leaving a charged silence in its wake. The hundreds of faces in the ballroom blurred into a single, expectant audience. The light of the spotlight was warm on my skin, a stark contrast to the icy calm that had settled over me. I looked down at the trophy in my hands, a polished crystal obelisk, heavy and real. It was tangible proof. I was real. My work was real. I gripped the sides of the podium, my speech notes suddenly feeling unnecessary. I knew what I needed to say. "Thank you, Governor," I began, my voice clear and strong, resonating through the vast hall. "Thank you to the selection committee and to the city that I am so proud to call my home." I took a breath and allowed my eyes to sweep across the room. I saw my team. To their table, David gave me a huge, beaming grin and a thumbs up. My engineers were clapping each other on the back. Their faces were full of genuine joy and pride. They were my anchor in this overwhelming moment. I gave them a small, private smile before continuing. When I first started Luminara Tech in my garage 12 years ago, it was little more than an idea, a belief. The belief that technology could be more than just convenient, it could be transformative, that we could harness the power of the sun not just to light our homes, but to build a brighter, cleaner future for our children. I paused, letting the words sink in. There were many people along the way who told me it was impossible, that it was a dream, a hobby even. I let that word hang in the air for just a fraction of a second too long. I didn't look at table 12, but I felt the weight of their gaze intensify. But a dream is only a dream until you surround yourself with people who are willing to build it with you. "This award," I said, lifting the trophy slightly, "does not belong to me alone. It belongs to my incredible team. To David Chen, my COO, who believed in this company when it was just a business plan full of scribbled equations. To Dr. Eris Thorne, our head of engineering, whose genius is in every circuit we design. And to every single employee at Luminara Tech who chose to take a chance on a wild idea. Thank you, this is for you." The camera panned to my team's table, and the room erupted in another round of applause for them. I felt a surge of warmth spread through my chest. I concluded my speech by talking about the future, about our new projects, about my hope for a world powered by innovation and collaboration. I spoke for 5 minutes, and in that time I laid out the entire story of my success, my passion, and my gratitude. And I did it all without once mentioning the people who gave me life but had refused to support my living of it. The omission was a gaping hole in the narrative, a silence that was louder than any accusation. As I finished with a final thank you, the ballroom rose to its feet in a standing ovation. The sound was overwhelming, a wave of validation and respect that washed over me. I shook the governor's hand again, smiled for the cameras, and then, as gracefully as I could, I walked off the stage. The moment I was out of the spotlight, I was swarmed. Well-wishers, city council members, potential investors, they all wanted a moment, a handshake, a word. I was passed from one conversation to another, smiling, thanking people, my mind a whirlwind. And then a hand grabbed my arm, a familiar, insistent grip. "Elizabeth." It was my mother. Her face was a mess of conflicting emotions. The horror had been replaced by a frantic, beaming smile that didn't reach her panicked eyes. "Darling, my goodness, we had absolutely no idea. Why on earth didn't you tell us?" Her voice was an octave higher than usual, laced with a desperate, public-facing cheerfulness. My father and Mark were right behind her. My father looked pale and stunned, while Mark had already composed himself, his lawyer face firmly in place. "I tried to, Mom," I said calmly, extracting my arm from her grasp. "Oh, that phone call," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand, as if swatting away a fly. "I was so flustered with all the preparations, I must have completely misunderstood. We are just so proud of you. I always knew you had it in you. I told your father just last week. Our Elizabeth is going to do something amazing one day." It was such a blatant, clumsy lie that it was almost comical. My father shuffled his feet, looking deeply uncomfortable. Mark stepped forward, cutting her off before she could dig the hole any deeper. He put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to look brotherly and supportive for the onlookers. Lizzie, this is incredible. Truly, I'm blown away. He lowered his voice slightly. Listen, the patents for this kind of tech must be a nightmare. My firm actually has the top intellectual property division in the state. We should have lunch next week. We could really help you protect all of this. The pivot was so shameless, so immediate, it took my breath away. In the space of 10 minutes, I had gone from being the family embarrassment to a potential client, a cash cow. I looked at the three of them, my mother with her fake smile, my brother with his opportunistic gleam, my father with his guilty silence. I saw them not as family, but as they were, strangers who wanted something from me. The power had shifted so completely it was almost dizzying. They were no longer the arbiters of my worth, I was the arbiter of theirs. A small, genuine smile touched my lips for the first time that evening. The calm I felt was absolute. The old hurt was gone, replaced by a profound and liberating indifference. Thank you, Mother, I said, my tone polite and placid. Perhaps we can talk later, Mark. I then tore. Ned as if noticing someone over their shoulders. Oh, excuse me, I see the mayor is waving me over. It was good to see you all. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving them standing in my wake. I didn't look back, but I could feel their stunned silence as I moved through the crowd, a queen in her own kingdom, finally free. The next morning, my world had tilted on its axis. My phone, usually silent save for work-related notifications, was a relentless buzz of activity. It started before I even had my first sip of coffee. First came the text from my mother. 7:15 a.m., morning darling, still floating on air from last night, so unbelievably proud, call me. 7:45 a.m., the phone lines must be jammed with everyone congratulating you. Your father and I would love to take you out for a proper celebration dinner tonight, just us. 8:30 a.m., Elizabeth, please call me back, I'm starting to worry. Then came Mark's attempt, which was far more direct. A text at 9:00 a.m. sharp, Lizzie, I've cleared my calendar for lunch on Thursday, 1 p.m. at the Capitol Grill, my treat, we have a lot to discuss. This is a huge opportunity. And finally, my father, a man of few words, sent a simple, haunting text that was perhaps the most honest of them all. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. I read the messages and felt nothing but a vast, quiet emptiness where a lifetime of longing for their approval used to be. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to work. The atmosphere at Luminara Tech was electric. A banner reading "Congratulations, LIZ" was stretched across the lobby. My team greeted me with cheers and applause. They had decorated my office with green and silver balloons, and on my desk was a framed photo of all of us from the gala taken right after my speech. We were all grinning, triumphant, my real family. I spent the morning in a series of meetings, basking in the glow of our shared success, planning our next moves. The calls and texts from my biological family became a distant, unimportant noise. For the first time, their drama was not the center of my universe. It was a minor satellite in a far-flung orbit. The peace was shattered just after noon. My assistant, Maya, buzzed me on the intercom, her voice hesitant. Elizabeth, I'm so sorry to bother you, but your mother is here, in the lobby. She doesn't have an appointment. I closed my eyes, of course. When I didn't respond to her summons, she had decided to come to me, the queen visiting the rebellious province. It's all right, Maya, I said, my voice steady. Send her in. A minute later, the door to my office opened and Helen swept in. She had dressed for the occasion in an expensive-looking cashmere coat, carrying a designer handbag. She was trying to project an image of a proud, successful mother visiting her successful daughter's impressive office, but her eyes gave her away. They were shadowed with anxiety. Elizabeth, darling, she began, her voice overly bright as she took in my office. The floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern furniture, the prototypes displayed on shelves. My goodness, this is all very impressive. Hello, Mother, I said, not standing up. I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. What can I do for you? The coldness of my tone seemed to startle her. Her socialite smile flickered. She sat down, perching on the edge of the chair. Well, I was worried. You didn't answer my calls. I've been busy, I said simply. Yes, of course, she said quickly. It's just last night was a shock, Elizabeth, a wonderful shock, of course, but a shock nonetheless. Your father and I, we felt a little foolish. Why? I asked, my voice flat. Because you didn't know your own daughter was receiving the city's highest honor for innovation, or because you had explicitly told her not to come because she would be an embarrassment. The direct quote landed like a physical blow. Helen flinched. The mask of the proud mother fell away, replaced by the face of a woman who had been caught. Now that's not fair, she stammered, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. I was just trying to protect you. I always have. I didn't want you to feel out of place or intimidated. Protect me? I let out a short, humorless laugh. You weren't protecting me, Mom. You were managing me. You were hiding me. For my entire life, you and Dad and Mark have treated my passion, my work, as a silly little quirk you had to tolerate. You never once took it seriously, not once. Tears welled in her eyes. It was her go-to tactic, the one she used whenever she was losing an argument. That's not true. We've always supported you. Supported me? I leaned forward, my voice low and intense. Do you call it support when you gushed over Mark's law school acceptance but called my science award cute? Do you call it support when you paid his entire tuition but refused me a $5,000 loan for the prototype that this entire company is built on? A prototype I had to work jobs to fund myself while living on ramen noodles. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the bustling city below. Do you have any idea how many times I almost gave up? How many nights I cried in my workshop because I felt so completely and utterly alone? The only thing you ever supported was the idea of me quitting and getting a real job so you wouldn't have to be ashamed of me anymore. I turned back to face her, and then there was the phone call, the final word on the subject. It would be better for everyone if you just sat this one out. You weren't protecting me, Mom. You were protecting your own image. You were protecting Mark. She was openly crying now, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I'm your mother, Elizabeth. A mother knows what's best. I made a mistake. I was wrong. We were all wrong. We're so proud of you now. You're proud of the trophy, I corrected her, my voice devoid of heat, filled only with a sad certainty. You're proud of the title, you're proud of this office and the headlines in the paper this morning. You are not proud of me, you don't even know me. I walked back to my desk and sat down, my authority absolute in this space that I had built. The time for you to be proud of me was when I was in the garage, covered in grease with nothing but an idea. The time to support me was when I came to you for help. You didn't just miss the boat, Mom. You watched it sail from the harbor and waved goodbye. Her sobbing subsided, replaced by a wounded look. So that's it? You're just going to throw your family away after all I've done for you? What you've done, I said, my voice softening just a fraction, is show me that I have to build my own family, and I have. They're right outside that door. I paused, letting the finality of my decision settle between us. I think it's time for you to leave. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. The fight had gone out of her. She looked small and lost in the large chair. Slowly, she stood up, pulled her coat around her, and walked out of my office without another word. As the door clicked shut, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger, I just felt quiet. It was the quiet of a room after a storm has finally passed, leaving behind a clean, clear, and empty space. After my mother left my office, the rest of the day passed in a blur of productivity. It was as if a massive, inefficient program that had been running in the background of my mind for 32 years had finally been shut down, freeing up all my processing power. The weight of seeking, fighting for, and mourning the loss of my family's approval was gone. In its place was a serene and potent focus. But I knew it wasn't over. The pleading texts and unannounced visits would continue. The guilt trips, the revisionist history, the attempts to leverage my success, it would be a war of attrition. They would try to wear me down until I let them back in, not out of love, but out of sheer exhaustion. I had won the battle at the gala, but to win the war for my own peace of mind, I needed to do something decisive. I needed to end it on my terms. That evening, instead of going home, I went to a different office. It was on the 45th floor of a downtown skyscraper with panoramic views of the city lights. It belonged to my corporate lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Cassandra. "A family issue?" she asked, raising an eyebrow after I explained the situation. "That's a little outside my usual scope." "Think of it as the dissolution of a partnership," I said. "A partnership that has become toxic to my primary enterprise, my life." A slow, appreciative smile spread across Cassandra's face. "All right, I'm listening. What do you want to do?" I laid it out for her. The first step was financial. Years ago, my parents refused to loan me $5,000 for my first prototype. They've never let me forget it, always referring to it as the good money they saved by not investing in me. I want to repay that loan. Cassandra nodded. "Simple enough, we'll cut a check." "No," I said, "not that simple. They called it an investment, so let's treat it like one. I want you to calculate what $5,000 would be worth today if it had been an early-stage angel investment in a company that is now valued at 9 figures. I want you to factor in compounded growth and a risk multiplier. I want the number to be significant." Cassandra's smile widened. She started typing on her calculator, her expression one of professional delight. "I like your style, Vance." After a few moments, she looked up. "The number would be very significant indeed, life-changing for most people." "Good," I said. "That's the check I want to write." "And the second step?" she asked. "The second step is a document," I explained. "I want you to draft a letter. It needs to be polite, formal, and legally airtight. It should state that the enclose Ed check represents a complete and final settlement of all familial obligations, both real and perceived. It will formally dissolve any and all future claims, financial or otherwise. It needs to make it clear that this transaction is the conclusion of our relationship. I want a clean break." "A declaration of emancipation, essentially," Cassandra mused. "Done." The next day, the documents were ready. The check was for an amount so large it made me dizzy to look at it. It was more money than my parents had probably seen in their entire lives. But to me, it was a bargain. It was the price of my freedom. Attached was Cassandra's letter, a 2-page masterpiece of polite, dispassionate, and utterly final legal prose. Signing my name on that check and on the bottom of that letter was one of the most solemn acts of my life. There was no joy in it. There was no thrill of revenge. There was only a profound and heartbreaking sadness. I was mailing a check to close the account on my own childhood. It was a necessary amputation to save the rest of my life. I sent the package via a bonded courier with signature required. The confirmation of receipt came the following afternoon. I imagined the scene, my mother opening the envelope, expecting a letter of apology, her confusion turning to shock as she saw the amount on the check, followed by the cold, dawning horror as she read the letter and understood its true meaning. The money wasn't a gift, it was a price, the price for being left alone. That evening, I stood in my apartment looking out at the city skyline. The lights of the buildings twinkled like a field of fallen stars. For the first time, I felt like I truly belonged here among the hum and glow of progress and possibility. The ghosts of my past had been exorcised. The constant, nagging feeling of being a disappointment had vanished. I was no longer the daughter of Helen and Robert Vance or the sister of Mark Vance. I was just Elizabeth, and it was enough. My phone buzzed, not with a desperate plea from a number I no longer had saved, but with a picture from David. It was a selfie of our entire leadership team holding up glasses of champagne in the office boardroom. The text read, "To Luminara too, the future is bright." A real smile, warm and effortless, spread across my face. I felt a lightness in my chest, a sense of an open horizon stretching out before me. My past was a closed book, paid for and put away on a high shelf. My future was here, with the family I had chosen, the family I had built. So, to anyone out there who has ever been made to feel small by the people who should have built you up, my question is, when is it time to stop waiting for their approval and start building your own stage? And what do you do when they finally show up, demanding a front row seat to the life they never supported?